And hello, Bills Mafia. That red light is on, which means this week's episode is officially live. I apologize for taking the break last week, but we are back this week for another fun episode in what is going to be the most important matchup of this Buffalo Bills wacky 2023-24 season. And joining me today, eventually on the show, is Built in Buffalo's own Kevin Siracuse to help me preview this matchup, as well as go over this really weird Bills season, as well as just some certain metrics that we can look at that might indicate what will happen on Sunday night against the Miami Dolphins. Thank you all so much for tuning into this week's episode of Under Review. Let's go.
Previous play will go under review.
And once again, everybody, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Under Review. My name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter at show_DeRosa. I am the host of a show that manages to post the We Are Live Now post 30 minutes early. So we were not live now. We were actually live now. So there you go. But thank you all so much for being here. I hope you all had an excellent holiday with your families, a great New Year's to boot. I hope you are all recovering from the cumulative hangover. I know I certainly am. Newsflash, it was a fun evening. But I want to talk a little bit before Kevin gets here, because he's getting in here at around 7:45, just to look back on this Bills versus Patriots matchup before we kick into the main subject of Bills versus Dolphins. And it was not pretty by any means offensively. It was one of the worst, really just one of the worst passing games metric-wise for Josh Allen, who finishes with a 50% completion percentage, 169 yards passing, and one pick, but did have 2 rushing touchdowns from inside the 5. Obviously, the defense balls out and gets you a handful of turnovers. You're talking about Rasul Douglas, who has been just an exceptional pickup for Brandon Beane and co. Talking about the Ed Oliver majestic flop interception. And then talking about Christian Bedford's peanut bunch and that fumble recovery. It was truly just a defensive masterclass with an offensive performance that felt like it wasn't complementing it the way you'd like. And couple that in with the poor special teams blunder in the beginning of the game. And this had the makings of a 2023 Buffalo Bills victory from the get-go. But really, when you look back at it, I think one of the main things that I want to highlight, that I'm going to get into it deeper with and Kevin later on the show, is really just Josh Allen. And if you follow me on Twitter, you know that I had a tweet that came out about Allen's performances since the bye. And it's really just been about how the inconsistency is looming in these matchups where they are still winning games. And trust me, I don't want to sound like I'm not grateful for the fact that they're winning games, but really just this inconsistency that you're getting from him as a quarterback and what's leading to it. And honestly, are these lapses things that are going to indicate trends to come if they go to the playoffs, or are you going to see a resurgence from him? And when I watch this New England game back and I see some of the missed throws and the awkward mechanics and the rush throws because of the pressure, I noticed that while it wasn't always pretty in the pocket for him, there were some throws that were missed. There were some characteristic Josh Allen style plays that get missed. And that is something that concerns me a little bit, just for the sake of, are you sure that he's comfortable? Is there any sort of, I don't want to call it miscommunication or any sort of, lapse with Joe Brady and how he's calling the plays, but has this transition to Joe Brady's style of play calling maybe caused Josh to also need to start picking up his rhythm and kind of understanding it more? But again, they're still winning these games. They're 4-0, and after beating the Patriots 27-21, you still see that this Buffalo Bills team could prove to you 2 things. One, that when crunch time hits and Josh Allen needs to play good ball and needs to make quality throws, he's capable of doing so. I mean, look, as unpretty as it was, you still saw a deep shot to Kincaid that was an absolute statement to begin the second half. You still saw some key plays and first down conversions with Khalil Shakir over the middle of the field, something that I have been wanting to see for so long with this Bills offense, more recruitment of him, especially after that Tampa Bay game. And you also see the ability to run and the lack of fear. I know there's been concern over his shoulder. I know there's been concern about the stinger, but truth be told, I still see the physicality from Josh where I'm not so much worried about any sort of injury. And it's why I think that these mistakes that you're seeing, mainly in the Chargers game, some in the Kansas City game, and some in this Patriot game, aren't things that are due to an injury and also aren't things that I feel couldn't be cleaned up in the future. So I just wanted to say this in the beginning because I know that I had people kind of say like, oh man, Josh Allen is, our quarterback and we're winning games because of him. And I agree with that. I don't think that there is any quarterback in this league besides maybe Patrick Mahomes and maybe, a prime, healthy, not hampered Joe Burrow that could rival him for best quarterback in the league. But I do want to see more consistency from Josh Allen. I want to see more reliance on underneath options. I want to see more recognition of the field, knowing when it's the time to take the deep shot and knowing when it's time to throw it away and live to fight another day. Because truth be told, those lapses and mental errors that you're seeing from him in year 6 are just things that shouldn't be happening. Like, I made a joke about how it's kind of seeing Wyoming Josh on an NFL field, but that still happens from time to time. But that being said, they get a win. I don't want to sound like a spoiled fan, but I want to highlight some of my favorite players from this Patriot game on offense and defense before we get Kevin in here and before we move on to Miami. And we're going to start out with really an unsung hero of the game, someone that I think was integral to the final drive, someone that I think has been really something of a revelation since the Bills have picked him up, and someone that I think they should continue to lean on, and that's Ty Johnson. Now, you look at the stat sheet, it's 5 carries for 22 yards. He averages 4.4 per carry. It's not overwhelming numbers. It's not he had 120 yards and we're all looking at Ty Johnson as the next running back one. No, but the ability to pivot to Ty Johnson in a crucial stretch of the game where you needed just a change in kind of the offset from James Cook, another dynamic, explosive runner, someone that has really good balance, someone that has really good power, can take a hit but still move, someone that you can just call a spark plug. That's what Ty Johnson feels like to me in this Bills offense. And while that Jet game at first felt like kind of a novelty game from him where you were seeing him get recruited into the passing game and they relied on him on 4th down and you're like, Joe Brady, he's pulling out all the punches in his first game. I legitimately think Ty Johnson has earned the running back 2 role. And I say that with full confidence. Now, I don't want this to come off as any sort of flack or disrespect to Latavius Murray, because I think Latavius Murray has had some key plays in this entire season. I mean, you could look back in the Miami game they played a few months ago. You could look back at several moments where he kind of galvanizes the running room and then James Cook follows and they end up having a lot of success with rushing. But I do feel like there were moments in these past couple of weeks where you're seeing kind of lapses from Latavius Murray that make me think that it's justifiable to start leaning a bit more on Ty Johnson and what he brings to the table. Because in this final stretch, in this final drive of this game, you saw the pivot to Ty Johnson. You saw meaningful carries in those moments where he had kind of an explosive push and he was able to get through and get yards after tackle and just kind of be able to sustain the clock being bled out and move forward. And that, in my opinion, was so crucial because when you set up these short downs and distances for Josh Allen, that's when you're going to get those first down conversions. And that's when you're going to get sustained momentum, especially when you needed it because the offense was struggling. So for this game, I got to give the flowers to Ty Johnson. I've been really, really impressed by him. Again, I don't want this to come off as me saying like I'm over Latavius Murray, because I'm not. Latavius Murray has a time and place and a role on this team. He's a good pass blocker. He could still run for power. I'm not out on him, but I do think that Ty Johnson's earned his flowers, and I got a lot of respect for how he played on Sunday. Moving on, Dalton Kincaid. I mean, we got to talk about Dalton Kincaid. There's 109 of you here with me right now, and I know you're all excited to hear about the promising rookie tight end who had a huge moment in this game. Again, a great throw from Josh, but watching that route from Kincaid in single coverage and watching him get that turn to be able to go upfield and get wide open and get that key reception, man, it was so fun to see, and also so fun to see them chalk something up for him going downfield. They've done it a few times this year. There's been times where it's either been covered, there's been times where it's been missed, but Dalton Kincaid is the truth, man. I'm telling you right now, I'm so excited about him. I have been critical of him because I have such high expectations for him. I remember talking to some of the Cover One guys and some Bills fans on Twitter about his drops and some of the drops he had against, or it was last week against the Chargers, and then some in that Kansas City game and, times throughout the year. And his selling point was catching passes. So obviously I'm going to be critical if I see some rookie uncharacteristic drops from him, but let me tell you something. This kid's good. This kid is really, really, really good. And I think as he continues to develop in this league and you see more confidence and more establishment of his role in this offense where he's going to be a middle of the field weapon, but also a field stretcher, is when you're going to really see this Bills offense blossom. And I think when we talk about some of the struggles of this Buffalo Bills offense so far, I do believe that the rookie development of guys like Dalton Kincaid, or like the second year development of Khalil Shakir that's still in the process, or talking about the offensive line and maybe like Osiris Torrance still having to take some leaps forward in his rookie season. I really think that this offense is at its floor and it's only going to continue to develop forward. The core is mostly together next season. And guys like Dalton Kincaid, for me, are what I'm truly excited about. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for how he played on Sunday and being a part of some key first downs, including that rollout by Josh Allen, that broken play where he rolled to his right near the end zone and then Kincaid's wide open, waving his arms to get a first down. Like, this is what I'm trying to see from him, the rookie. And it's just so promising. And I really, really am excited to just kind of see his development go on as the year goes on. Hopefully playoff run continues and next season. And then last but not least, listen, he didn't play a great game. I criticized him, but I'm also going to give credit to Josh Allen because there were some key conversions. I think the first down conversion to Gabe Davis on 2nd and 15 that ended up leading to that huge Dalton Kincaid play was one thing that I love to see from him. I don't think it's a lost cause. I don't think that this inconsistency from Josh is something that's going to plague him. He's already a very high variance quarterback. And also, what he doesn't do with his arm, he's probably going to make up for with his feet. And he had 2 rushing touchdowns. So I will give him the credit he deserves for at least allowing this team to stay in this game and making those plays when he needed to make them. It's just the consistency I want to see. But ultimately, for offense, that is what I was a huge fan of against the Patriots. Moving on to defense. Everybody. I think everybody. No, I could say everybody. I really could. But I think I got to start up front with Ed Oliver because Ed Oliver is an absolute force. Getting Daquan Jones back and allowing this team to not have to rely on the blitz, but rather use blitzes as an ace in the hole when they need them. Although I think McDermott got a little happy-handed with how much pressure he was sending at Bailey Zappi on Sunday. But Ed Oliver is a huge part of what makes this pass rush successful. His ability to just bull rush people over the middle and get through. Now having Daquan Jones next to him to eat up those double teams. It's just watching him blossom this season has been so much fun to watch, and he's doing it at insane value. We're talking about metrics that put him on the upper echelon, the pantheon of top DTs in this league this season, and he's making significantly less money than them, and he deserves a lot more. Like, listen, if it were up to me and I had the funding, I'd be paying Ed Oliver top DT money right now because that's how he's playing. But the fact that you got him to this contract and you're kind of thinking like, all right, I feel like this is fair value for Ed Oliver. Let's see how he goes. And then all of a sudden he comes out with this year where he's at 9.5 sacks and he's causing so much disruption in teams running. And you see him just drawing double teams, but beating them. And you're seeing undersized DT bring that to the table. I love it, man. Ed Oliver deserves so many flowers. That interception was so much fun to watch too, because damn well he wasn't letting that ball fall. And as soon as I saw him on the game angle flip, I was like, nah, there's no way that touched the ground. That's a clean pick. Ed got his pick and had a great game. And then, of course, guys, Rasul Douglas. I mean, it goes without saying. Really, both of the corners, Christian Bedford, I think, played a really good game. I know there was that one long reception on an honestly nice throw by Zappi and nice catch by, I think it was Jalen Reagor, who for some reason turned into the second coming of Christ in this game. But Christian Bedford played a good game, but Rasul Douglas has been, again, this is a word I should not be throwing around so often, but a revelation. He is an unbelievable zone corner with insane instinct, technique, the ability to kind of read things and know where to be, but also just jump off of his route and get onto a ball or get onto the pass catcher if he needs to. Like, these are things that when we lost Trey and we had to rely on the uncertainty of Kyer Elam before he went down, and then we had Benford, who you were hoping could further flourish as a year 2 player, and then Dane Jackson, who honestly has been having a pretty solid season in his own right. I was a little concerned. I didn't know how the back end coverage was going to hold up, and Brandon Beane must have had that same thing because he goes and trades for Rasul Douglas. And I mean, listen, man, if we're talking about trades in the Beane tenure, I mean, that's got to be the best one, right? Because he's been exceptional. I mean, I'm talking playing at an all-pro level. He has absolutely fortified his role in the secondary, and pairing him with Christian Bedford, who is now developing to be a stout CB2. I'm I'm incredibly confident in this cornerback room going potentially into the playoffs, and talking about teams like Miami, talking about if you run into Kansas City again, or if you face Houston. Like, I have no doubt in my mind that we have the corners right now to compete with any team in this league, no matter how good their receivers are, because these guys are just such good corners, such ball hawks. Benford can play both ways. Douglas can play both ways, but Douglas is so good in the zone that McDermott's got him running that I'm pumped, man. And I think he deserves a ton of credit. The pick six, the interception, he affected the Ed Oliver interception too. So basically, like, free, if you want to, call it an assist. He's been an exceptional pickup by Brandon Beane. And if you aren't confident in the cornerback room, be confident in them, man, because I'm telling you right now, they're set. And I mean, you could talk about the safeties, you could talk about some other players that you're concerned about, but I got no doubt in my mind that this cornerback room's set, and it's set for next season. It's set for next season because Douglas will be here. Bedford will be here. And honestly, the continued emergence of Kaiir Elam, hopefully. And, if they want to let Dane Jackson walk or bring him back, Trey White will eventually come back. You won't have to depend on Trey White as much. I think there's good reason to be optimistic about this cornerback room going into next season. But the Buffalo Bills sneak away with a win. It wasn't pretty. They got it done. They beat the Patriots 27-21. I did not mean to rhyme that. Not at all. But now we close the book on the New England Patriots, and we move forward to the next opponent, the biggest game of the year, and that's against the Miami Dolphins. And this is a topic so big, I cannot carry the weight of this alone. I need someone to help me. And that person who's going to help me today is Mr. Kevin Siracuse. Kevin, thank you so much for joining me, man. How you doing tonight?
I am good. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, I can hear you just fine and dandy.
Perfect. Good to see you. It's been a few weeks.
It has been a few weeks, man. How are things? How was your holiday?
Good. It was made better with these Bills victories, as I've actually been predicting right along since Thanksgiving Eve. I don't know if you've seen that, but I've been saying that the Bills are going to get hot, and I predicted back on November 22nd that the Bills were going to lose to Philly to drop to 6-6, and then they were going to rip off 5 straight to win the division. I said it was going to come down to the 11-5 Dolphins versus a 10-6 Bills, and the winner gets the division. And here we are.
Yeah, this is feeling eerily similar to and before I say the next words, I have to knock on wood. Hang on. Okay. This is feeling eerily similar to the 2021 season. They go on that run at the end of the year and they make it into the playoffs, and then and honestly, I think a lot of people forget those final 3 games. So if I remember correctly, it's Carolina, I'm sorry, not the New England game. So 3 of those 4 games, Carolina, Atlanta, and the Jets. That offense was not clicking. Like, they did not look that good in those games. Allen had 3 picks against the Falcons. The Jets game, the passing game wasn't really doing much. The Panthers game, he was getting shut down before they eventually broke because Cam Newton was not able to throw a football that game. And they ended up, being on the field for too much. I think that this really does feel so similar to that, where you're seeing this offense kind of have a bit of I don't want to call it growing pains with Joe Brady, but you're seeing kind of them come down to earth a little bit before they go into this key game and before the playoffs. So Kevin, just before we get into this Miami matchup, talk to me about your perspective of this team since the bye and what you think happens going forward.
Well, I think it's a combination of what you said a little bit here, how, Joe Brady's trying to figure out new ways to try to get this offense going, because it's probably natural. Normally the first time you do something, it starts out really great. And then in terms of football and the NFL here, teams are going to counter that. So then you're going to have to figure out how to counter that counter. So I think that's where we're at now, where, take a look at Stephon Diggs, for example. At the beginning of the year, it was Diggs. And we were saying, okay, this is great. He's Stephon Diggs. We love him, but we got to find other guys to get involved in this offense. So Joe Brady's been doing that. And I loved what he's done with James Cook, Ty Johnson, Khalil Shakir, Dalton Kincaid. I think we could see more of that. But, he's been finding ways to get other guys involved. And now we're sitting here saying, hey, what happened to Stephon Diggs? So I think that's like a microcosm of what we're going through right now, where we're just trying to find different ways to get different players involved and to try to get the offense clicking at the right time. But the main thing is they're winning. So it doesn't matter how you win at this time of the year. It's just like, you know what? I don't care if we barely beat the Chargers, if we barely beat the Patriots. They were one-score games. Okay, you can look at it as a positive or negative. I try to look at it from the positive side and say, okay, we are winning those close contested games now instead of losing them because, the Bills were 2-6 in one-score games after that Philly game. So now they've ripped off 4 straight. 3 out of those 4 have been one-score games. So it hasn't been pretty, but they're finding ways to get it done. So that's why I'm going to remain optimistic and say that you do have Stephon Diggs, and hopefully he's not hurt or hampered by an injury, and you do have Josh Allen. So I think that this team is going to click at the right time, and I think they're going to pop off Sunday night, and they're going to ride that momentum into the playoffs.
Yeah, and I brought up this comment from Richard because I saw it earlier. Like, it is something to note that we are talking about, and I've been talking about, some struggles from this Bills offense in the wake of a 4-0 run that you needed to happen, where if we were walking into the bye week and we just watched that Philadelphia loss and we saw, okay, we have to win these next 5, would you care how they did it? Absolutely not. I just want them to win, and I'm happy that they're winning. Trust me, I am happy. But it is true, we are so used to seeing this team kind of have this specific identity where they can really take teams to the woodshed and beat the brakes off of them and blow them out. And then you become so confident in that approach that you forget that sometimes circumstances will arise where your offense kind of goes on the downslope and you run into a team that's either hot or hungry or both. And I think about the Chargers game, and I talked about this with a bunch of people, but the Chargers game was kind of not a trap, but you look at the fact that they get rid of Brandon Staley and they have Giff Smith take over. It's pronounced Jiff. And then you have a new DC take over too. And there are wrinkles that these coaches can provide that you have not seen on film. So you go into LA and all of a sudden there's the wrinkles and you weren't prepared for this. They do something different on the back end. They send a different rusher they don't normally rush with. They blitz more often than they should. I don't know the specifics of it, but I know damn well that this offense was flustered when they played the Chargers until the back half where they collected themselves and, like you said, found a way to win the game. And that's what you need to see from this team, because when you get to the playoffs, that's what it's about. You're most likely not blowing teams out in the playoffs. It's happened before, sure, but you're playing really tough competition. And if you have eked out a few wins against some bad teams, but you still came away with a close win, then I think going into the playoffs, that's the experience you need to take from this stretch, especially when you're seeing them do it in a do or die moment. And going further into that point, because you brought up Diggs and kind of the dispersion of the ball now, I think it's interesting because we were saying a couple months back, at least some people, that the offense had become a bit Diggs-centric. And I didn't have a problem with it because if it works, it works. And that's my philosophy with the Bills and football. If it works, it works. If Diggs is getting 200 yards a game and you're winning games, I don't care if that's what you want to do because it's working. But eventually, you got to be able to pivot if it starts getting snuffed out. Now you have Joe Brady, who you could tell is a big believer in making you a part of the game plan when he wants to do it because the defense is calling for it. Dallas was the most concerted James Cook effort we've ever had, and it worked beautifully. And Josh Allen barely had to throw, and they put 33 points on the board. The LA game, it's a myriad of things, but eventually he calls upon Josh to try and find his reads, and he does. I think that as far as the Diggs conundrum, that drop in his production is really a byproduct of situational play calling that we were kind of asking for with Joe Brady and we're getting. Do you agree with that, Kevin, or do you think it's something more than that?
Yeah, I think it's Joe Brady just trying to spice up the offense a little bit. So it's not just Stephon Diggs, Stephon Diggs, Stephon Diggs. And that's essentially what we were asking for, like you were saying. So I do think that he's done a nice job. But going back to my first point, I think this is where he's going to have to throw that counterpunch to the counterpunch, because now teams are starting to figure it out. Like, okay, James Cook had a really successful game versus the Cowboys, started to cool off a little bit against the Chargers, 16 rushes, 48 yards against the Patriots. Now, the Patriots did have the second ranked run defense, but now you're going to have to go back to Diggs because teams are starting to understand that you have James Cook as a weapon, or you have Dalton Kincaid as a weapon, or even Ty Johnson for that matter. So this is where Joe Brady has to take that next step as offensive coordinator and say, okay, now I'm going to go back and get my wide receiver one engaged. And one other point that I want to make is a lot of people have been asking me, why is it always so close? Why do the Bills play down to the level of their opponents? And I think the best answer that I could come up with is these teams have nothing to lose. The Chargers and the Patriots had absolutely nothing to lose and everything to gain. So this wasn't one of those games where a Bill Belichick led team is just going to lay down and say, okay, we're going to lose so we can go get a higher draft pick. I mean, they are going to bring it as they did. And that's why I think they've been so close, because these teams are essentially throwing the kitchen sink at the Bills, because that's essentially their Super Bowl. The Chargers
Yeah.
aren't going anywhere. The Patriots aren't going anywhere. So these teams want to play spoiler and say, okay, if anything, we want to salvage this season by knocking Buffalo out of the playoffs. That would make us feel better. If we could knock this Super Bowl contender out of playoff contention, that would give us momentum going into the offseason.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, it's funny that we're talking about this right now, because before we got into this stretch too, we were all kind of expecting, okay, offense is going to have to carry because they just put up 30 points on the Eagles, or over 30 points on the Eagles. We're going to go past the bye. It's probably going to be an offensive show. But I found the stats, and since the bye week, it's been very interesting. So the Bills' overall season statistics in EPA per play on offense is top 5, but since the bye, they're 12th. And in drop back EPA per play, they are sitting at a clean 15th. So you're seeing this kind of drop off in pass production, and there's multiple factors for that. I won't pretend that they haven't been running the ball a lot more, considerable amount more, because they trust in James Cook. But I do find it odd, or at least kind of telling, for some of the struggles they've had, that there's been this significant of a drop off since they've gone past the bye. And when you look at the defense too, right now, the passing defense is absolutely buzzing. I looked it up too. The dropback EPA, they are number 1 in the league since the bye week against opposing offenses, which is just telling you how good their passing defense has been in this scenario. So it's been kind of like a role reversal, where we were all so worried about this defense tailing off and kind of crashing and burning because of the injuries. But McDermott's managed to keep them together and play some competent football, and now playing really, really good football. And again, when I talk about the Allen metrics, I also got to be cognizant of the fact that, like, hey, they're playing some really good defenses too. Kansas City, New England, a revamped Chargers team that someone, I think it might have been Nick, said it was a blind game. And then you talk about Dallas, who by all metrics going into that week were a top 5 defense. They are not playing easy competition. It's why we talked about it being the gauntlet of the season, but they're 4-0. And here we are talking about the upcoming matchup. You like that segue, Kevin? I'm proud of that. That was totally improvised. But before we get into the Miami Dolphins matchup, and this will be my last before we get into, because I know the fans are probably annoyed that I keep pivoting. You are here watching this live. I appreciate you so much. And if you could do me a favor, if you do Kevin a favor, if you could do everyone here a Cover One a favor, and please be as kind as to like this video. It helps our channel out immensely. It helps us get all the resources that we can get to look up these statistics and find all of this data and be able to watch all the film for all of these games and to put out the content we put out. Our reach, your like, will help us so, so much and help us continue to make content for you. Thank you. Appreciate you. Kevin, let's talk about this game. It is the biggest game of the season by far, obviously. We're going into Miami. Josh Allen's track record speaks for itself, but you saw a very jarring performance from the Miami Dolphins against the Baltimore Ravens. Now, I think a lot of people's attitude and outlook about this game would have been affected a completely different way if Miami either just made it close or won. They got the brakes beat off of them, like absolutely humiliated in Baltimore. Wasn't even close after the first quarter. And you talked about, again, some of the concerns that people have had about the Miami Dolphins, which is what happens when you face good defenses and you have to play from behind a little bit. Do you falter, or can you rise from the ashes? And there have been instances of Miami kind of falling bait to that narrative and not being able to overcome it. So talk to me about your outlook on this game, just a general point of view about the Dolphins, and how do you think the Bills attack them?
Well, to your point, the Dolphins have only beaten 2 teams with winning records in the past 2 seasons. One was Dallas just a couple of weeks ago, and Dallas is very close to pulling that off on Christmas Eve. The other one was the Bills in the Heat game last year. So it had been over 450 days since they had beaten a team with a winning record, and then they ended up beating the Cowboys. But I knew that they were going to lose one of those two between the Cowboys and the Ravens. Now, when I made my hot take a few weeks ago, I said that they were going to lose to both teams, and I had them beating the Titans. So that was the only part that I had wrong, that they dropped the game to the Titans and they beat the Cowboys. But either way, they're 11-5 going into week 18, and the Bills are 10-6. And again, the winner gets the division. So I'm pretty confident But at the same time, I am nervous because, like you said, it's the biggest game of the year. And here's a crazy thing, but by now we all know the Bills can either win, get the division, get the number 2 seed, potentially host multiple home playoff games, or they can lose and the season's over just like
Yeah.
that. It's crazy because
That terrifying, man.
yeah. So now we have to root against Pittsburgh and we have to root against Jacksonville. And the thing is, at least Pittsburgh and Baltimore play on Saturday. So hopefully we'll know by then, because if Baltimore can, I don't want to say pull off the upset because I don't know what the line is, but if they rest their starters, then they would probably be the underdogs. But here's the thing. If Baltimore has a number 1 seed, are they going to want to rest their starters 2 weeks in a row? And especially with Lamar Jackson in the MVP case, I'm thinking they're going to at least want to play their starters for one half at least, maybe try to pad some stats for Lamar at least. And then, Pittsburgh beat them earlier this year. So I highly doubt that the Ravens want to drop 2 divisional games to the Steelers.
Yeah. And I think people underestimate how much divisional games matter to those players that might not be going to the playoffs. And I think that when you saw Mike Vrabel's presser today about it, that's kind of telling of how that mentality is for any locker room that's, at least not in shambles. They don't want to lose. They don't want to let a divisional rival go to the playoffs. And they know that. Tennessee absolutely knows that. And the same way Baltimore knows that. And think about it this way. While yes, Baltimore has it locked up. And while yes, like there's a very, stark difference in, I guess you want to call it record and like overall season success between Jacksonville and Tennessee, these guys aren't going to want to see their divisional rivals in the playoffs. And whether that's a team that's already there or a team that's not there, playing spoiler is a real thing. You want to relish in their misery. You want to end your season on a high note. So I do think that, the Ravens might rest people eventually. I don't count out the fact that they might play a half, like you said, where they have Lamar playing or where they have these guys playing. And maybe, they might pull people early because they got that 1 seed in the bag. But when I talk about the Jags and Tennessee game, Trevor Lawrence is not a healthy quarterback right now. He is playing basically, I want to call it at like 70% of his full power. He's completely banged up. I know he had that ankle injury a few weeks ago. There's been issues with his shoulder. He's really, really banged up. And concussions. And then you talk about Tennessee, who's a team that, again, they did it to Miami. They're going to play all of their starters. Will Levis is a fiery quarterback. DeAndre Hopkins is still a great receiver. I wouldn't rule out an upset from there. And one thing that I love is that these games are going to happen early enough where should they both drop their game and not help the Bills out, that just puts more pressure on the Bills. And I think they're a team that, given the stretch and the fact that they're winning games, would know it and would try to play their asses off knowing that this is do or die. And I'm looking forward to it.
And one other thing I'll say about Baltimore is let's not forget that this team had a 24-game winning streak in the preseason. So they are very comfortable with playing their backups. Now, I will say during the preseason, backups are playing backups and third stringers and fourth stringers. But Baltimore is usually decimated with injuries. And just for that fact alone, that they had a 24-game winning streak in the preseason, that shows that they have been able to get it done with their backups before. And even if they do play their starters for that first half, you would like to think that they could get out to a cushion and then the backups can finish the job off. So I'm trying to remain optimistic, but like someone said in the comments, let's just not even rely on other teams. Let's just go take care of business and beat the Dolphins like we know we can.
Yes, I completely agree with that. And also Charles answered, Baltimore rested starters a few years back in the same situation and beat Pittsburgh last game of the year. It won't be a pushover game. I don't think it will be either. And listen, like, not for nothing, Baltimore puts Tyler Huntley in that game. Tyler Huntley's going to play. Tyler Huntley does not get many opportunities to play. It hasn't gotten many opportunities to play this season. He had the playoff starts last year. It didn't go well. You don't think there's this ounce of I want retribution and I want to ball out in this final game of the season? Because I think so. Now, maybe I'm optimistic. Maybe I'm playing it a little too like, rah. But listen, man, it's divisional opponents. We remember what Buffalo did when Miami had an opportunity to get in the playoffs a couple years ago and put up 56 points. This is a thing that I think teams relish, and I think it could possibly happen. And hey, listen, I feel like while we want the division and while we want the 2 seed, I also think if we know that we're going to the playoffs, there will be a slight sigh of relief, but you still got to beat Miami. So Kevin, I asked you to come up with some matchups that you're excited about in this game, and I want to hear your 3 key matchups. We can go back and forth on this. So you could start at 3. I'll go 3, and then we'll just rattle them off. What are you looking forward to watching? What do you think is going to be a key component in the Bills beating the Dolphins on Sunday night?
Well, I don't know if you'd count this as 1 or 2, but the Bills wide receivers versus the Dolphins secondary, because Xavier Howard is out, and they said that Eli Apple is going to be the opposite corner of Jalen Ramsey. And that's always been a fun matchup to watch with Stephon Diggs versus Jalen Ramsey. And now you throw Eli Apple into it, and that's the guy that just about every single fan hates, whether it was his time with New York, Cincinnati, Miami. He's like the ultimate trash talker, and it's so fun to go against him. So, yeah, I don't know if you want to count that as one or two, but
I'll
Diggs
count as
versus
one.
Ramsey, and then probably Davis versus Apple or whoever else is matched up. I think that's going to be very, very interesting.
Yeah, I'll allow that to be one. But if you didn't have more than another one after that, I'll count it as two if that helps you out. But
I can think of more. So go ahead. We'll just keep
There
going
we-
back and forth.
No, all good, man. So my number three, again, all three of these to me are pivotal, but D-line versus O-line, like Bills D-line versus Miami's offensive line. Miami's offensive line is injured. They're dealing with the inconsistent in and out of Teron Armstead. You're talking about Eichenberg filling in for Connor Williams, who went down. Again, that was a huge point of attack for the Bills defense when they played Miami in that first game. They lose Connor Williams pregame. Eichenberg takes it. There's some bad snaps. There's some miscues. There's some really odd tempo issues. And also the pass blocking wasn't great. And again, what teams are doing and what Baltimore was able to do to Miami was really take away that 1 second where he has that window to hit Tyreek Hill, get his spot, and then, now he has to move on in his progression. So if you can kind of replicate that game plan by creating pressure up front, because he's not going to have enough time for the second read, especially considering Jalen Waddle might not be playing. I don't think he is going to play. And if he is, he's not going to be 100%. That's a massive matchup. And this Bills D-line has been eating, man. They've been very, very good. They're healthy. You get Daquan Jones back. You could disrupt their running. Achane is an absolute monster. You can affect him in the backfield. I think the fact that they have their pieces back now is so crucial. And I also think the fact that now, because you have Daquan Jones in that interior D-line, and you could simulate and disguise a bit more than you were able to when you had the likes of Jordan Phillips and Poona Ford, that's going to expand the threat of this pass rush, and ultimately, I think, be a huge factor in Tua's progress in this game and whether or not he could see the field cleanly, have comfort, and be able to deliver. And it's why I think it's my number three. Number two, let me hear it.
Well, I was going to say what you said. It's Buffalo's defensive line versus their shattered offensive line. So I'll use another one here. So let's see. How about the obvious, Josh Allen versus Christian Wilkins? Because this is like the epitome of the rivalry, where Wilkins is always doing, speaking of Eli Apple and Jalen Ramsey and just being dirty and a nuisance, Wilkins and Allen are always going at it. And I think it was pretty quiet in the first matchup, but that is something to always watch for. So I guess we could pivot and say that could be another matchup to watch for, is Buffalo's offensive line versus their defensive line, because the Bills' offensive line has been great and they've been healthy, knock on wood. But the last couple of weeks, they've been starting to falter a little bit, and Josh's head scramble around a little bit more. So I think that is a matchup to watch for as well, highlighted by Wilkins and Allen.
Yeah. That is one that I think, again, I can't understate the importance of that matchup. I think that's literally where your defensive game plan lives and dies. And, we can all say like that your game's won in the trenches, and I agree with that point. But it's such a difference in how effective this Miami passing attack is when they can rely on Tua seeing the field cleanly. Now, back-end coverage matters in this regard, which is why we'll get to some of my other points. But creating problems up front and making Tua have to guess before he can actually deliver and possibly guess wrong and have to hesitate in any way, shape, or form with two really good interior defensive linemen. Like, I think that can blow up the whole game for Miami if it goes to the Bills' favor. And I'm really excited to watch that. My number two is what your number three was, because it is, I was going to say specifically Stephon Diggs versus Jalen Ramsey, but hell, let's just call it receivers versus corners. Let's call it what it is. Passing attack versus Miami secondary. Again, I don't think Stephon Diggs' drop in production has been from any injury. I don't think it's been from anything other than game plan shifting and Joe Brady trying to make certain parts of this offense or certain concepts more hyper-focused than others, depending on what he's seeing from a defense. But in a game like this, where you're dealing with Jalen Ramsey, you don't have a Xavier Howard now. I think you could try to create some things that throw them off. If Jalen Ramsey is sitting in a particular spot and not playing man, and you can allow Diggs to get to a soft part of the field that might not be manned as well as they were with the Xavier Howard, then I think this is the game where you need to incorporate him. Make Miami fear Stephon Diggs like they did in that first game. And I know that they already are, but reestablish his dominance, because at the same time, teams will know that the production has gone off. Teams will know that you've gone away from this receiver a bit. So I want to see the Bills make that game plan to be the Stephon Diggs show if it can be. Because another thing, Kevin, is I think when you talked about this before, and this is a point I wanted to make, the Bills have always, since Diggs has gotten to Buffalo, been that identity of he's our alpha. We're going to find our alpha. Our alpha is going to kindle the fire and get us going. And we're going to have an explosive passive attack because teams are going to fear him. I feel like part of the struggle, or part of the, if you want to call it a quote unquote regression, which I don't think it is, of Josh Allen in this post-bye stretch has been from the fact that there's an identity shift, because they don't really want you to know. They want you to kind of guess based on whatever the matchup is. And that's why you had a Dallas Cowboys game where James Cook was the sole identity of that team for that day with a few plays mixed in. I think this is a game that you have the opportunity to go back to your roots. You have to go back and kind of just pick them apart, deal with the secondary that might not throw that much, or deal with the defense that might not throw that much pressure at you. And maybe Josh gets a lot of time in the pocket to find Stephon Diggs. I want to see that reemergence of Diggs being the alpha. And I think this is the game to do it. And, for the most important game of the year, why would it not be, So that's my number 2. All right. Let me hear your number 1 matchup. Better be good or we're done, or I'm shutting the show down.
All right, so my number 1 matchup to watch for here is Sean McDermott versus Mike McDaniel. The defense versus the offense. And we saw this earlier in the year, and McDermott won the first matchup. And I think that he can win the second one. But this is where it gets interesting, because it's a huge game, and we've seen McDermott have its faults in the big moments. But like I said, as of late, 4-game winning streak, they've won 3 out of 4 in 1-score games. And McDermott always has a plan to dial up against opposing quarterbacks, specifically younger quarterbacks, or just, quarterbacks like Tua, who aren't necessarily top 5. And you could say that he has a plan for even those guys too. Like the Bills, at least in the regular season, have always done a good job with Mahomes. Jalen Hurts, kind of had their number, but I feel like Tua is that perfect type of quarterback that McDermott has seen multiple times. So he will be able to scheme the defense up. Now, I just want to see how McDaniel responds, because I saw a tweet today that said that the Dolphins are 4-0 following a loss this season. So it's just very interesting. Defense versus offense. McDermott took the first matchup. Will McDaniel have a plan for the second match? I mean, obviously he's going to have a plan, but how good of a plan, I guess, is a better way of putting it. And then will McDermott be able to counter that plan with another great defensive scheme?
Yeah. And I think that's one thing that it's valid to be concerned about, because you've seen Mike McDaniel make those pivots to his offense this year. And I think one thing about last season, when you look at that second game against Miami in Buffalo, was that, they knew the Bills were going to sit in nickel. So they kept, making these adjustments in their running game where they would match up a tight end or a lineman with Taron Johnson, who obviously doesn't match up with him physically. So then they would get like this burst downfield and get someone open and have a really successful rushing attack. And I'm worried that they might try to replicate that. And it might take McDermott a long time to pivot from the nickel, but we'll see. But I agree. I think that's a very, very, key matchup, is how is Sean McDermott going to fend the Miami Dolphins? And again, while I've talked about the trenches and I've talked about this defensive line and how it can attack Tua is going to get those occasional pockets. He's going to get that time to throw. How does your secondary handle it? Can they take that look away and get off hill where he has to look for someone else? Is Miami going to try and use him as bait and try working underneath, because this is a desperate game for them as well? It's going to be a very interesting matchup. I'm really excited to watch it, but really, I have a lot of confidence in this D-line, to the point where I do foresee Miami having a lot of trouble getting it going consistently. That's not me saying that Miami isn't going to get their licks. Again, that first game, Miami was going toe-to-toe. It was an absolute heavyweight bout for the first half. And then you look at some of the other matchups we've had, and Miami doesn't just go away. They will always play you competitive. They're going to want to play you competitively. I don't think this is going to be a runaway game or a blowout or anything like that. But I do think that this defensive line is going to aid the secondary, because if you're bringing too much duress to Tua, I don't think he's going to have a game's worth of time against some inferior defenses like he's done in the past to see the field cleanly, to know that that read's there and he could take it, or to be baited into making some mistakes. So I agree that that's a huge matchup. But my number one, it's obvious. It's Josh Allen. It's Josh Allen versus Miami's defense. Like, listen, we could talk about the receivers and we could talk about everything. But as I said to start the show, and as I'll say to kind of get on the wind down of it, he's got to put up the performance of the year. And Miami is a game that he's always, I want to say most of the time, played his best ball. Back against the wall game, you know that there's potentially no tomorrow if you lose it, but let's pretend that there isn't. This is a game that you need to show out. Sunday Night Lights, you're in primetime. Everyone's going to be watching. You know what this matchup is. It's a divisional matchup, your chance to steal fourth in a row, your chance to get the 2 seed, your chance to right pretty much all of the wrongs of this season, erase how bad it went, get into the playoffs with a dominant seed, host a home playoff game. All of that is on the line, and it lives and dies with your play. You need to be more consistent. You need to be patient in the pocket. If you don't have anything there, don't take it. If you find an underneath check down or something that's schemed up to be a bailout, if you don't have anything down the field, take it. Bradley Chubb is not going to be playing in this game, but Christian Wilkins will be. Freaking Melvin Gordon probably will be, because Melvin Gordon just finds the Bills in every lifetime and destroys them. It drives me absolutely nuts. Oh, did I just say? Oh, I said Gordon. I'm sorry, Ingram. Excuse me. But Melvin Ingram has found us in every lifetime.
I just wanted to make sure. That
no, I appreciate that, because I would have kept saying it too. Melvin Ingram. You want to know why I messed that up, Kevin? Because I don't want to remember, because he hurt me so many times last year. The past 2 years, actually, for Pittsburgh and Kansas City and Miami, he somehow has the game of his lifetime. So the point I am making is, I need to see Allen just be the most poised and confident he's been in the pocket. I don't want to see rattled bad decisions. I don't want to see poor mechanics and these throws behind open receivers in the middle of the field. What I want to see is decisiveness, confidence, poise, play your game, play your aggressive style, be able to read it properly, trust what's being called, know when you can take something and know when you can't. Because I think that balance and that ability to kind of deliver like they did in that first game is what was ultimately the difference maker. And you saw in that first Miami matchup, the two teams going toe-to-toe. If Josh Allen doesn't play a good game to start, we don't know what the result of that game could be. Because while the defense did figure it out, if this team finds itself in a 10-point hole and they're struggling, that might be a death sentence against the Miami team that has played really well when they have a lead in hand. So this has to be Josh Allen's biggest game. Again, I looked up the defensive statistics since the bye. Miami and dropback success rate dropback EPA is 24th in the league. Teams are passing on them. You saw Lamar Jackson last week have great success against this Miami secondary, now without Xavier Howard, and a defensive front that doesn't have Bradley Chubb. There's no excuse for you. You go on the road, you need to play the best game of your life and secure the 2 seed for this team. And if you can do that, you are going to change a lot of narratives about you. You're going to change a lot of narratives about this team. You're going to earn the respect of everyone around the league going into the playoffs. And most importantly, you're going to make every Bills fan really happy. And we're not going to complain on all of our shows that following week. And that's really the most important part, Kevin, in my opinion. So do you have any final thoughts on this matchup before we kind of get to the home stretch of this episode?
Well, I was thinking about some other matchups to watch for, and not that this is necessarily like a huge matchup. I think we need to talk about Sam Martin, because he had 6 punts land inside the 20. So going off your point about Josh, I agree. He needs to absolutely ball out, because this isn't a game where you can just solely rely on your defense and say, okay, the offense can just be off all day, and we're going to have Ed Oliver and Terrell Bernard and Russell Douglas bail us out. They're going to play solid, but this is a game. I know some people might not like this phrase, but you really need complementary football. You have to have all 3 phases clicking. And the defense can do their thing like they did last week. But when you have an offense like Miami's, you might have to go toe-to-toe. They're going to make some plays on defense, but you need Josh Allen to be Josh Allen. So that being said, when the moments that he's not Josh Allen, I would love a perfect game and for them to not punt at all. But when Sam Martin's name is called upon, that field position is going to be huge. And I thought he did a great job Sunday against the Patriots, backing them up into very difficult situations that made things easier for the Bills defense.
I glad you brought up Sam Martin because I actually forgot to bring this point up and it's important, but the Bills special teams are currently 22nd in DVOA. They have not been good. They just have not been good. And Sam Martin had an ugly stretch for a few weeks where he just was not really just no long punts. Like it wasn't anything consistent. It was really just ugly punts, bad spots, touchbacks, nothing like that was putting teams in a bind. And then that Patriot game, and honestly, the past couple of weeks, he's been notably improved. That's a big component of this game too, man, because the last thing you want is to give Miami any quality field position. You need to choke them. You need to give them as little room to work with as possible, because guess what? Everything I said to you about the line against Miami's offensive line and baiting Tua into mistakes and forcing him to kind of rush and maybe throw an interception or take an untimely sack, that all becomes even more pressing when you get him back inside of their own 10 or their own 5. So Sam Martin, special teams, I hope they come to play on Sunday because 22nd isn't good enough. There needs to be some improvements. You just gave up that opening touchdown against the Patriots, which I watched that and I just giggled because I'm like, that is so on brand for this year. And the fact that the Patriots, after what happened last year, came into Buffalo at a similar time, ran back for a like, dude, I was like, nah, that's just like, that's payback. I understand. Like, that's what the universe wants to do. But special teams got to play too, man. And that starts with Sam Martin. That also starts with the coverage unit. Don't allow Miami to have favorable field position. And also, this is Deontay Hardy, man. I want to see more out of him in the return game too. I feel like we actually have had flashes from him, and there was one pretty good return in that Patriot game. Help your guys out. Put less pressure on Buffalo's offense. Get yourself into that 30, 40, even if you can get to midfield range. I just feel like field position in a game like this matters so much. It matters in every game, but when you're talking about the explosive component of Miami, the speed that they play with, the fact that one broken tackle can be a literal death sentence against them, help yourself out by giving yourself better field position and playing better special teams. When we talk about complementary football, Kevin, that's one of the things I think of, and I think it matters so much when you're talking about a game like this that is essentially a playoff game before the playoffs even start.
And it's crazy because the Bills could very easily be playing Miami in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, they could, couldn't they? Wait, because Miami, what's the lowest seed they've clinched? Is it 5 if they lose?
I'm pretty sure Cleveland has a 5, no matter what.
So they would have the 6.
So is it either Buffalo can get the 2, Miami can get the 6, or vice versa, right?
Well, no, Buffalo, I think, would clinch 7 if they lose the game, but they have Steelers or Jaguars lose, one of the two. They would take 7 because then I think who is the other team? I'm blanking. It's Cleveland, and then it's So if one of those teams loses, Buffalo clinches 7. Someone correct me if I'm wrong here, because I have not done anything with these playoff metrics. I just see this is what they have to do to win, and they're in, because that is not my forte at all. All I care about is getting in. I don't want to work through. That's a Kevin Masseri question, but I do know that if they win this game, they'll get 2, and the lowest they can be is 7. So I don't think Miami and Buffalo would match up with each other again unless they hit each other in a different round. I think the likely team would be, if they get to 2, they would play the 7, which would either be, I think, one of Houston or Indianapolis. So,
well, if Miami wins, they would be the 2, and if Buffalo wins, they would most likely be the 7. So wouldn't Buffalo just go back to Miami for that first round matchup?
Yeah. I think you might be right. This is the one thing that I don't dabble in this at all. I just let the odds play out. I read the list, and that's how far I go. So I want to see what everyone's saying in our chat. We got AJ here, actually. Bills would take 6 and Dolphins would get 3, assuming Chiefs win, if Bills get help. Okay. So then there you go. That's one example. I'm not going to talk about this anymore because I'm very clearly sputtering because I know nothing about this. Listen, I could fully admit that, man. This is not my forte, but I just want to win this game. I don't even want to entertain the idea of being a lower seed. I want to be a 2. I know you want to be a 2 too, right? Like, there's no reason that we want to be anything lower than division winning fourth year in a row and just walking away out of Miami with a huge win, hosting a whole playoff game again, and getting retribution for last year's playoff run. But all right. Kevin, you got any final thoughts before we let you go and we sign off tonight?
Squish the fish, baby. It all comes down to week 18. And I just hope and pray that my prediction is going to come true, because aside from me, like, that'd be great if I would be able to predict that over a month ago. I care more about the team winning and having the joy for this fan base, because I don't want to think about that situation where it's either on one side or the other, where it's like, oh, we have the 2 seed, we're in the playoffs, so we won the division for a 4th straight year, or oh, we didn't even make the playoffs, because then all those games are going to come back into light where it's like, Denver, how'd we lose 12 men on the field? The punt return touchdown in overtime against the Jets. You let Mac Jones drive on you and they scored 29 points on you. So I've been trying to remain optimistic and say, maybe it's been a blessing in disguise, because maybe if the Bills had 11 men on the field against the Broncos, Ken Dorsey would still be the offensive coordinator. So that's how I've been looking at it. And I hope I can continue to look at it that way past Sunday, because if it's the opposite way, then I think I will be, and I know everyone else will be too, kicking ourselves saying, how in the world did we lose to those 3 teams?
Yeah. Listen, I've always had this kind of reconciliation with this season. Back when we lost to Denver, I kind of just realized, like, this is the bed you've made for yourself, right? Like, if you miss the playoffs because of a game like this, then you shouldn't have lost it. You know, that's it sounds simple to say, but this team lost games to really bad opponents that they let hang around and ultimately beat them in the most cheeky of ways, with Denver's DPI and then the final screen to Ramondre Stevenson in that Patriot game that went for 40 yards. And you're talking about that blunder. I just think if that's what breaks you, then you got broken. Like, there's no excuse for that. But you can, like I said before, right all of your wrongs if you beat Miami this Sunday and ultimately walk away with the division title. Then we'll look back on this year and just talk about how weird it was and how insanely variable it was. But ultimately, they got the job done. So I'm with you. Squish the fish. Go out there on Sunday, beat the Dolphins. Josh Allen, play an efficient, clean, comfortable game. Let's see what you're made of, because this is the time where we need you to be the franchise quarterback we all know you can be. And before I throw the read up here, I just got to point this comment from RJ, because this is honestly a great assessment of the Bills, which says, Bills are the best at playing, quote, uncomplimentary, quote, football. It's almost uncanny how if one phase looks unstoppable, the other 2 phases are hot garbage. Not all games, but there have been plenty of games where there's 1/3 of the team loaded. And I think, like, there's been complete game wins, like against the Raiders, Commanders, that first Dolphins game, the Dallas game. But then, yeah, you talk about like the Denver game, where for like most of that game, the defense was actually playing really well and the offense was sputtering. And then, of course, the final drive happens and they collapse. You talk about this Patriot game where the defense was all but dominating. And then you're talking about the offense sputtering again. Like, there have been some really weird games this season, which is why I really want to win this division, because for the rest of my life, I will always tell people, hey, remember 2023 after any bad loss? Because it'll be something that really pisses people off. But I love this comment, RJ. And for all of you in our chat today, I see there's been a lot of discourse going on. I also really love that when we got to the seeding conversation, it's like, I think it's 3, I think it's 2. Because listen, I have no idea, man. I'll find out after the show and actually know for sure. I didn't expect to get there, but Kevin.
Well, I will say real quick that Kevin Masseri and I will be doing our show Going Deep Buffalo tomorrow night. So he is the best at that. So if you want to know all the seedings, make sure you tune into that, because he knows them like the back of his hand. I know him for the most part, but especially when I don't have him in front of me, I'm kind of like you, Joel, where I'm like, I don't know, like there's so many different, because I was looking it up last night actually. And I saw this article from The Athletic, and it showed every single scenario. And then they had all the ties. And it's like, well, if this team ties and this team loses, I'm like, this is too much for me. Let's just win, and then we don't have to worry about anything else. But Kevin Masseri is very good at that.
Yeah, no, Kevin's a wizard with that. I give him full credit. I don't know how you do that, because he's doing it without even looking at anybody's stuff. He just crunches the scenarios, and like he prides himself on being able to tell you what's going to happen. And I guarantee you he's not looking at a notebook when he's doing it. He probably knows it all from memory. So credit to him. Credit to you, Kevin. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I know you just plugged it, but plug it again. Tell us where we could find you, when your show's going on, what you guys talk about. I want our chat to hear it. You guys deserve a lot of credit.
Well, I appreciate that. Kevin and I are with Built in Buffalo. It's called Going Deep Buffalo on Built in Buffalo. So we are on Wednesday nights at 7. So make sure to tune into that, because like I said, Kevin will have all the scenarios and I will try to provide my commentary throughout. But we will obviously recap the Patriots game as well, and then give a full rundown coming up here for the Dolphins game. And then hopefully we'll be able to talk some playoffs in a couple of weeks as well.
Yeah. Yeah, guys, please check him out. And also, again, Kevin, thank you so much for being here. I know damn well if I was in that show with Kevin and he was talking about the scenarios, I'd probably just say, yeah, that's awesome over and over again, because I would have nothing to contribute to that. This is not my forte at all. But all I do know is that a win and you're the division champs, you got playoffs set and you got a home field game waiting for you. That's what I want for this Buffalo Bills team. For all of you that have joined us in the chat today, I want to say thank you so much. This was the most views that we have ever had on Under Review, ever. And that is super freaking cool. And that's because of all of you joining, checking out the discussion, checking out the conversation. I truly, 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 truly appreciate each and every single one of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to come check this show out. It means the world to me. I hope you can be back next week because we're going to be having another fun episode. Hopefully not cathartic. We'll find that out on Sunday night. But this was super fun. Kevin, you're a great guest. You're welcome back anytime. For all of you, on Twitter, you can find me at show_DeRose. You can find him at Kevin_Siracuse. We got our handles listed below. Thank you all so much for being here. This was a ton of fun. Before you go, I have to tell you about the Cover One Premium Pass, but I'm going to let Greg and Aaron do that for me. Guys, tell us about it.
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
Yes, become one today for $60 a year. You get access to some super, super fun content. The premium Slack channel is a never-ending Bills discourse, and that's a great thing because if you are up at 1 a.m. and trying to talk some Bills, I guarantee you someone's going to talk about Bills with you. It's an awesome experience. You get some access to some pretty cool channels, including some film channels. You find out about some cool things in advance. It really is something that I think is well worth your time, but most importantly, that pass is the lifeblood of Cover One. Check it out in the description below and subscribe. You'll be helping us out so much because you will be able to allow us to get access to all of the resources that we use here at this network. But again, everybody, thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate all of you watching. Again, find me on Twitter at show_DeRosa. We will leave it. I have been stuttering all night, Kevin, and it's been driving me nuts. I had such a good outro going and just nothing. I think I'm getting sick. That's probably what.
Yeah, I thought you did great. So,
oh, thank you, man. I appreciate that. I got a little tongue tied here to wrap the show up.
Just like the Bills, in the span of a 60-minute game, you're going to make a few mistakes. So,
yeah,
the only thing that matters is you get the dub at the end, and I think you got the dub tonight.
Yeah, I appreciate you, man. All that matters is we get a dub, and we got a dub tonight because this was an awesome show. We will be back next week with another fun topic for you. But as always, go Bills. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you soon. Have a great night.
Go Bills.
Go Bills.